Over the past several weeks, we have been building toward this conversation deliberately. We started early in the quarter, so in first quarter, because now technically we're into second quarter, but we started with leadership, agency, access, authority. Agency is the ability to act. Authority, the ability to decide. Access is the ability to reach the people, the tools, systems, and structures needed to carry out the decisions. And then as this curriculum has developed, we talked about the nuance that has become clearer, which is those three ideas are not binary. They are each of them a continuum. The independent operator may have agency where they can choose to do the work or not do the work. The solopreneur may have authority. They can say yes or they can say no. But maybe they don't have a position of strength when they're saying yes or saying no. The freelancer may, in fact, have access to the opportunity, but not the leverage to make the deal healthy. And this distinction matters in the context of pricing, which is what we're going to talk about today. After we talked about agency, authority, and access, we talked about instability. We talked about business model collisions. We explored the idea of business owner identity versus the economics of the business not matching. We talked about accidental boundary crossings and deliberate seam synergy between business models. And then most recently, Dave Robs and I talked about what business are you building? And the point there is we're not changing subjects today. We're just talking about the same structural questions and looking at one of the places where they become most clearly visible, and that place is price. This conversation matters because risk in the business world is almost always measured financially. Eventually, any confusion that's hidden behind the glossy marketing landing page ends up showing up on the P&L. It shows up as gaps in cash flow. It shows up in underpricing. It shows up in pressure in the margins, in the income margin. It shows up when someone is being paid to do one thing while carrying responsibility for some much larger level of authority.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Dave. And it shows up when the client expects one level of outcome, support, revisions, access, or responsibility, but the operator priced some product that was much smaller. The disconnect in expectations matters. One of the easiest mistakes to make is to let survival pricing in your own local economy become a strategy when you're in a global marketplace. Because the cheapest possible price is not automatically the right price. The price that you put your offer on the table needs to reflect the value that you're creating for that client, the responsibility for that client that you're carrying, and the kind of business that you are trying to build. Access is not only what enables action, access also determines whether the operator has enough leverage, visibility, control, and alternatives to say no when they should say no. And this becomes very important when we're talking about pricing, because some people don't just underprice because they lack confidence. Sometimes they underprice because the structure of the opportunity gives them insufficient leverage. They feel like they don't even have a choice. So what we're going to talk about today is not a session about how to charge more. What we're going to talk about is understanding why pricing can get distorted. Because pricing reflects the business model, it reflects the responsibility, the delivery burden, the market positioning, the authority, access, and value that you're creating. It reflects the expectations and the leverage in the relationship. And we're going to make this concrete today instead of abstract by using the Alex case study. But this time we're going to add a piece of Alex's situation that we have not mentioned before when we talked about Alex. We're going to talk about Alex's market position, his economic context, and how his work is being sourced. But before we do that, Dave Robbs, would you please briefly introduce yourself and the kind of business experience that you're bringing into this conversation?
Okay, I was in manufacturing, different levels, different size companies, and all that type of thing for over 30 years. So I saw firsthand what kind of worked and what didn't work. Um, I better understood the pricing of our machine shops because they had multiple different types of machinery, and some was extremely expensive, some was very inexpensive, and learning to identify those in the shop and what the true cost of that piece of equipment was, and pricing it in the marketplace appropriately, as well as the more inexpensive equipment that we had and pricing it correctly. So it was a bit of a learning curve over time, different, like I say, in different shops and so forth. But it proved to be quite equitable in making our estimates and quotes more accurate to what our needs were. So it was having that understanding and so forth. So, and then the last probably 15, 20 years, I've been in a variety of things. One was I had a nonprofit where I did business training and development in Southern Africa. And so that was quite eye opening and provided me the ability to look at an entirely different market structure and marketplace and better understanding the global marketing if that's the type of business you're into. So, yeah.
I think you're on mute, Keith.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Keith. Unmute.
Okay, well, that's cute. All right, fixed it. So same question, David. Kind of your operational background and what your introduce yourself, what your experience is.
Sure. Yeah, David Robbs. My background, I've worked a lot of different jobs across retail, warehousing, customer service, and scheduling, planning. I've been in some management roles, not necessarily was hired for that, but kind of grew into that. A lot of delivery communications, most recently contracted at Microsoft for the last 13 years, working on a experiential demo team has supported a large event stage keynotes all the way down to little pop-ups, more of like a guerrilla marketing type of pop-up and show demos across, Windows consumer features. With that team, I've had a lot of experience. I know Keith, you talked a little bit about some of the scope creep and a couple weeks ago, and that really resonated because I've seen that quite a lot. And what starts out with really good intentions tends to grow, especially when you prove that you and your team are successful, then it begins to be, oh, well, you were successful before, we can come to you later and still find that same success because your team is so good and so, so very polished and at executing and making things happen. Um, Sometimes that's a good thing. That can also be a bad thing if you're not being compensated for it properly. So I think we'll probably be talking a little bit more about that today. But then most recently, focused on launching my consulting business where I work specifically focused on operations and helping small to medium-sized businesses organize, think about how they do things, making sure their processes make sense, that they're documented and that they're clearly explained across their team so they can be as successful as possible or as they want to be. So, yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you both. So to set the stage before I ask the actual first question, I'm going to reintroduce Alex with a little bit more context than we were using in the previous sessions. Up till this point, we've talked about Alex's service as a web designer, his business structure, and how his business model drifted. But we haven't talked about Alex's market position or his personal situation. So Alex began in our scenario, in our case, as a web designer, and he was doing some web design maintenance and some hosting, but then somebody asked him to do some SEO work, and so he did scope creep, and he said add SEO, and then somebody wanted him to do automations and CRMs associated with the traffic that was coming to the website, so he did that. And next thing you know, he's supporting this huge scope of capabilities. And he's a really good web designer and maybe not as good at those other things. But significantly, Alex lives outside of North America. He lives in some lower cost economy, but because of the access through Fiverr or Upwork or some other platform like that, he can get global clients. And this detail matters because those platforms aren't bad. And getting work through those platforms is not wrong, but the way that work is sourced through those platforms puts the provider at a position which lacks leverage. And so Alex has tended to price low, aggressively so, because the rates that he's charging still feel meaning to him in his local economy. And being able to offer a low price has seemed like a practical way to stay competitive. But then what happens during the actual job negotiation, clients start saying things like, well, if you start cheap and prove yourself, like David was just saying, we may have more work for you later. And if that work was the same kind of work at the same rate, maybe that would make sense. But when it's a different kind of work at a different scope of or scale of responsibility, that becomes a problem because people are saying, well, just get us going along and we'll expand your services. Well, the service requirement scope expands and not the compensation. And the access issue is often the work is being done inside the client's software account, inside the client's web host, inside the client's environment, which means Alex has access to the opportunity, but no control over the assets, the systems, the long-term relationship, nor is he building a future bargaining position. So over time, work expands, expectations expand, and Alex is carrying more responsibility than the price was built for. And that's what I want us to think through today. So Dave Robs, if Alex is using low price as a way to compete in the global market, what concerns does this raise? What kind of buyer does this positioning attract, especially in platforms where the relationship starts from the very beginning with a price comparison? I've got 3, 5 people, all of whom have prices showing on the platform.
Right. One of the things that you run into is you probably, Alex would have a good understanding of his local market, his local competition, those kind of things. But in terms of a global approach to it, it becomes very difficult because he's going to tend to be on platforms like Fiverr, for instance, or something where the people that are looking to those organizations are looking for, I'll say well, I don't want to say cheap. They're looking for
Look for a deal.
they're looking for, yeah, an inexpensive approach to their situation and their need. Um, and so from Alex's position, he has his competition in that market on that platform is probably people that are in the exact same situation he's in. They're in a I'll call it a lower economic situation, that type of thing, as compared to if he was quoting alongside people in the United States, for instance, they're going to be much higher. Cost of living is higher. All those kind of things have that situation to it. So it becomes a difficult thing because you want to engage new customers and new opportunities, but at the same time not market yourself out of the picture. And I think in the beginning, doing what he's doing and pricing himself where he feels comfortable and so forth is fine. But as time goes on, you need to move away from that model. If you're providing a very competitive, good product, which in many cases you would be, and you have customers that get comfortable with your services and all that type of thing, there needs to come a point in time where you have a discussion with those individuals and you lay the cards on the table, so to speak. You say, look, I'm trying to grow my business, I'm trying to develop, I'm trying to get into more of the global market, etc., but I cannot do that pricing myself where I have been. And it just needs to come down to that kind of a conversation. Now, if you've got a one-off customer or something like that, I don't want to worry about those people because you're going to have all the one-off customers you want. But if you're building relationship um, with an organization like let's say in Europe or in the United States or something, you have to come to a point where you get real with them. And again, if you're providing a great service and they love what you do, that should put you in a different position in terms of marketing. And it's being able to recognize that and have that honest conversation. Now, it doesn't mean that suddenly you're charging you're charging prices that would put you in the United States, let's say. But you begin to charge more than you have been charging based on your economic situation. So it's is being able to have those real conversations that's very, very important. And trust me, the people you're talking to understand. It's not like they're ignorant of what they're getting. And so I feel like that has to become a point in time that you make that happen just for your own growth, your own success, and so forth and so on. So it's almost like it's a one-on-one kind of a thing. It's not like you suddenly change all of your marketing strategy and all that type of thing, but you have those one-on-one conversations with your clients.
Yeah. Thank you. David, I'm gonna ask this a slightly different way than I'd originally drafted it. I think in your notes, this is question 2. If Alex were pricing around a smaller or simpler offer, but over time that delivery expanded into support, revisions, troubleshooting, ongoing responsibility, what starts to go wrong when Alex has positioned himself from the beginning as a low-cost option?
Well, I think a few things could go wrong. I think one thing that Alex could discover is that he was very confident and skilled in his abilities where he started, but as the ask grew, as there was more support, there was troubleshooting, there was responsibility, assuming that Alex has more than one client. He may get a bit over the tips of his skis in not just his ability, but the time that he has available. Um, Even outside of pricing, just looking at the reality of continued expanding responsibility. Now it's not so much if he were a website developer, for example, and he was building a website. Once the site is built, unless there are problems, it's pretty much built. And then there's changes that happen on some type of a cadence, whether it be a special promotion that his client is offering, or there is product changes. There perhaps they sell a product that is very seasonal, so there would be seasonal changes. But those types of things would typically have come up and been talked about. And then Alex knows what his calendar looks like and knows that, hey, as I move from winter into spring, I know that there's going to be busy. I'm going to have a week or two where I will be fairly heads down supporting this specific client. But if things have shifted to a point that not only is that the expectation, but now there's more expectation, Keith, you mentioned SEO, you mentioned there could be further marketing that is being asked of him to do. Whether or not he has experience and feels like I'm confident in this, he wants to take care of that client. But he also now realizes, and I've myself have been in this situation where I've had clients ask me to help with sales, to help with specific marketing. And I've had to tell them, I would love to find someone who can help you, who will be very effective. Or they've asked me about CRM, which I know very little about, but I could say, I can research that for you, but just know that I am learning as well as you're learning. And if you want someone who's an expert who can actually help you without having to take the time and spend the cycles actually learning this product, so I can help you, which I'm happy to do, but know that it's going to take a little more time. And I think you may be better served by if I can find someone who can come in and help you with your CRM specifically, if that's their need. So I think there's a few ways, and then obviously there's pricing, right? If Alex's initial scope of work, and I think that's something that's very, very critical to have, is a very clear expectation and a very clear scope of work. So when the scope of work and the ask increases, we can always come back to the contract and the agreement that we've had and say, this I'm happy to talk about this new ask that you have, and I actually have some skill in that. I can help you there. But we need to address our contract and our scope of work that we initially agreed upon and have a conversation. And to, what Dave said about having that conversation. Well, as you're building that relationship, those types of conversations that you have that are focused around contract and scope can help set you up for those types of discussions where you talk about the revenue, you talk about the cost and what you're charging. It's a little bit different, but you're having those types of conversations already, and that makes a conversation around an increased pricing overall be that much easier to have because you've already had some of those conversations with them.
Yeah, I think that's right on target, and leads really closely to the way this usually presents itself. And I deliberately didn't start with this question because for the three of us having the conversation, for people who are listening live and or who will listen to the recording later, laying that foundation from the three of us are looking at this problem. When we have this conversation from a consulting or coaching perspective, it almost always comes first with this question. And the reason I wanted to have those other two questions first is so that we could lay a foundation, because in the medical world, it's the presenting problem. So somebody comes to the doctor with knee pain. Well, knee pain is the symptom. It's not the underlying problem. The symptom that often presents itself in business coaching, business consulting is the question, what should I charge? So, just starting with Dave, if Alex specifically were to say, what should I charge? What would you want to understand before trying to even answer? Or what would make it impossible to give Alex an honest answer until Alex was able to honestly say, these are the factors that affect my pricing?
Okay, well, first of all, that's a very common problem or a common situation in the business world, no matter where you are. And so, one of the first things I would ask Alex in this case, I would say, Alex, what do you intend to be charging 5 years from now? All things being equal, how much is your time and your service? What's the value of it 5 years from now? And probably it's not what he's thinking about at that point in time. Um, but the thing that I've discovered in businesses that I've owned is that I tended in the beginning to price myself too cheap. The logic behind it is, well, I want to build a market, I want to attract customers, and why are they going to pay me an unknown quantity the same amount they would pay somebody that's been at it for 5 or 10 years? Okay, so and what I discovered is that that's the wrong mentality, because you have a client that you're charging them a certain amount of money, and then 2 or 3 years down the road you up the ante, and they're saying, well, what more am I getting now than I was getting before for less money? And that's a hard question to answer. So what I would tell my clients is, charge what you want to be charging down the road in the future, okay? But provide discounts, or this is my startup rate or whatever. So what I'm telling them is, I'm going to give you a deal right now, but the deal doesn't last forever. At some point in time, you're going to be paying this much, because that's really what my time and my background and all that thing is worth. But currently, I'm going to give you a startup discount or something, so that what they land on is, they land on the real number. And I'll give you a real, for instance, for me, when I started out doing consulting, I was charging $45 an hour. Well, that's ridiculous in the United States. So un, I don't care about the rest of the world. I do, but I don't. And but
Biggest purpose.
eventually I was charging double that just in a matter of a couple of years. Well, my current clients are going from 45, and then they're 70, and then it's 90, and they're thinking, well, why am I paying twice as much? Um, but if I tell them it's 90, but I'm going to give you a 50% discount today to get started with me and all that type of thing, that prices it cheap enough until they can realize that I'm really worth the 90. But the 90 is what sticks in their mind. At some point in time, it's going to cost me $90 an hour or whatever it is. And they realize that when I say I'm giving it to you at a discounted rate, that discounted rate isn't item infinitum forever. So that's kind of a mental gymnastic that you can perform to get them in the idea that somewhere down the road, this is a real number. um and they remember that number. And so I think that would be the recommendation that I would give, especially if you're looking at a global situation. But it's also very important if you're looking at the global market that you understand the marketplace in that part of the world. Okay, not my work with companies in Southern Africa was much the same way because they're I in one country I was in Malawi at the time the exchange rate was like 700 to 1. So for $1 you get 700 Malawian dollars, and and there's no real comparison. It's kind of beyond their scope. But it would be important for a person in Malawi that say is on Fiverr and doing business with a company in the United States that they have a bit of an understanding of what that is. What should the market be in Europe? What should the market be in the United States, in Australia, in whatever? So you begin to look at that to help analyze what you charge. And so I think again it's a progressive kind of a thing, but any contractual things that you do, you might even say, and I'll provide this 50% discount for the next 6 months or whatever. So they realize that, at some point in time, the clock starts ticking at a different different level, if you will. So that would be one of the things that I would do, would be to get an understanding of the market value and all that type of thing in these other countries, and then to be able to negotiate again. It's that in business you have to remember you're not just selling a product or selling a service, you're building a relationship. And so out of that relationship should come discussion as to how to for you to get what you want and them to get what they want.
Yeah. And you said you mentioned Malawi and then compared it to like Europe, Australia, United States. I would think that even Malawi to Johannesburg or Cape Town
Yes,
would be
South
would be
Africa.
would be a significant economic different
Absolutely,
environment. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Um, yeah. Uh, David, any thoughts on that?
I think Dave hit the nail right on the head.
Okay. Um, so let's then dig the kind of dig the question a little deeper. Um, how would you want Alex to think about a global market other than assuming that the only strategy is I can afford to do it cheaper? So what is the difference between acknowledging that market reality of the difference between a Central Africa, a Philippines, Southern Africa versus South Africa, Australia, Europe that we've been talking about. So, um, and what's the difference between acknowledging those different market realities and allowing simply I can be cheap to become the business's identity? Does that shorten the question?
Well, I think if I understand the question, I mean, obviously, cheaper cost is what you're referring to. I can do it cheaper. You can, but should you? Because I
Yeah,
think
that's the
offering a
question.
low cost many times. I mean, I've had different contractors provide bids for anything from like fence work, or at our local church, we've had different quotes for um, landscaping type of work. So a service that's going to come in and Most times we see quotes that are kind of, very, very close together. It's 600 or it's 700 or it's $800. So you're kind of like, okay, so for this project, everybody's really close here. But occasionally you'll get a quote that's like $300. And it's a bit of a head scratcher because you think, did they not understand the scope? Or do they know what they're doing? What type of am I going to be left with a hedge at all when they trim it, or are is the whole, or are they just going to and it begs the question then, and you begin to question like what level of service, or what am I going to receive? Am I going to have to then, let's say you hired like a painter to paint your home on the exterior, and you have one quote for 5,000, another for 55, and a third for like 65. But then you get a fourth quote and it's $2,500. And you think, wow, that's fantastic. That's almost half the cost of the lowest bid. But you then have to ask yourself, am I going to then have to end up paying $4,500 or $5,000 to fix the $2,500 paint job that lasted for 3 months, and now I have to do it again? So I think part of the risk of saying I can do it cheaper is people begin to question the quality. What are they going to get? Are they going to pay you your cheaper rate and then have to let you go and hire someone else to come in and undo and then redo? So it may even cost them more than what they initially started. So I think, like Dave said, understanding what the market value is, where your client is key, but then also not necessarily saying I can do it cheaper, because if you're looking for long term, if you're looking for a relationship and or someone who is going to refer you to others, or you're going to build a name in that Fiverr community, people are going to know you're reasonably priced, but you also provide incredible work,
Yeah.
and you will begin to grow based on that. And that's really the client that you want. I think
Mhm.
when we were having this discussion earlier, one of the thoughts I've had is I've had some people who have within, so using the Microsoft example, one of the things that our team provides is a lot of production that we can bring to different teams and different groups that are within our marketing sphere, and in our team of people that we would want to help. So we come in with, you could go and you could pay a production company $15,000, but we can do it for free. Well, that's an incredible savings for anyone who has a budget that they have to manage every quarter or every year. It's a no-brainer. But what we've seen oftentimes is when it's free or it's very, very cheap, the customer, they don't actually know what they want. And so we have had to, even though we're helping these other teams within Microsoft, we have had to position it and be very, very descriptive up front and ask very, very specific questions, so we know what it is they want and we help them discover what they want. So then when we actually go to work on it, it doesn't take us 2 or 3 times what it should. So also be cognizant of, if you're very, very cheap, who are you attracting, and do you want that client? So just another thought there.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly the point, David. Because the note I have, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it verbatim. Low price may win attention in the short term, but it often destroys leverages, compresses the margin, and teaches buyers to expect more value than the price that is able to sustain the cash flow that's coming back to you. Um, I think that you just gave a very specific example of how that plays out. When you offer to do it at a literally no price, no cost, or very low price, it typically bypasses the scoping contract writing phase, and they just, oh sure, let's go, let's get started, and then the scope just keeps expanding. So gentlemen, we've talked about how when Alex expands his service, every time someone asks, can you do this? He's now suddenly dabbling in all of these different services. And he hasn't mastered any of it. Is the issue. What I'd like to talk about is how would Alex start thinking differently about the price if he was governing the business model that he was in? Said a different way, when they change the offer but keep the old pricing logic, what mistake will people typically make? So the difference, and to make a concrete example, when he's gone from a project of building a website, occasional cyclical seasonal updates for the spring versus winter services, versus the retainer work of maintaining a CRM, doing ongoing social media marketing, doing ongoing SEO, writing email campaigns. What mistake do people make when they change, when they are using the pricing of the original project, but they're now doing retainer kind of work?
Okay. To me, one of the problems that then arises is that, let's say you have a half a dozen clients, and they're not all necessarily priced the same, but one is becomes more demanding of your time as compared to others. All right. And in other words, the scope of work begins to grow and change and all that type of thing. It becomes very difficult at that point to suddenly up the price. Where if you take a look at each service that's provided and price it correctly in terms of time demands and all those kind of things, it becomes easier to again have the conversation of, well, that was fine here, but now for me to be in this position of doing this ongoing kind of work, it's going to be priced differently, and having that structure set up ahead of time. So thinking through the offerings and that type of thing that you're making out there becomes very important. It's much more difficult because you're going to take time to think it through and analyze it and look at that type of thing. But in the long run, that will serve you well because you'll already have structure in place to support what the demands are now as compared to what they were. And so again, it helps to build that communication ahead of time. You can always modify something, but it's very hard to modify something that's not created yet. And the person that's procuring your time may feel like they're being manipulated or whatever like that. So having some pricing structure ahead of time is important. When someone would ask me, well, what about it? Could you monitor this for me or do that for me or whatever? Um, First of all, I wouldn't give an instant response. My instant response would be, well, let me take some time and think that through and analyze it. But if you have pricing structure already in place, then it becomes much easier. And again, the final pricing for anything contractual is negotiable anyway. So price it where you think it is that you want it to be. And then you can always, like I say, back down a little bit or make them feel like they're getting some extra for not a lot of extra money, et cetera, et cetera. But having the kind of the boundaries already set in your own mind, even if they're not written down, but in your business and in your model, that you have that in place, then it becomes a point of negotiation instead of instant response. So I think that would be my recommendation for anybody that's doing that kind of work. If you feel like, and what will tell you if it gets into stuff like that is what your current experience is. Have you had customers that have asked for more or a different play on what it's doing? So setting up is one thing, managing is a whole nother complexity of things to do. And so having some definition already established in your mind or on paper or whatever, then you're not like caught off guard. It's when you're caught off guard with a question or something like that. That's what can throw you for a loop. So that would be my recommendation is having some structure already established.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. David, did you have a thought?
I had a couple of thoughts on this, specifically. The first I was thinking about where as Alex goes from a little bit of everything to thinking more about, narrowing what he offers. I think one of the things I immediately thought of is like, what are you good at, and what do you actually enjoy doing? And so for Alex, he may really enjoy building websites, but getting into like SEO and social media campaigns and CRM, that may not be his niche. And so when he's outside of those things, yes, he's providing a service, but is he good at it, and does he enjoy it? I think that would be something that he would think of as well, and look at. I mean, if I was asked to do sales, I would not have a pleasant experience. Would I do it? Yes, I would do it if I needed to, but I wouldn't enjoy it. I much rather work in organization. I'd much rather work in operations. The other thing I thought of was for Alex, and it is a little bit aligned to doing what you're good at or what you love. If you look at if you use the example of Alex as a web designer and he's really good at it and he loves doing it, chances are he's going to do it quickly and it's going to be done very, very well. It's going to look polished because he has that eye for what clients want to see when they come to a website and what they don't want to see. But if he's asked to do something else, it's probably going to take a lot longer. The client is still expecting that this is, Alex is really good at this, so he's going to be great at CRM. Maybe not. And the client can also be frustrated. And then the pricing. If someone came to me and said, "Can you help us write our SOPs?" Yes, I can. This is what the process will look like. This is how long I estimate it to take based on interaction with what it is, what specifically you're asking me to do. And there's going to be a start date and a stop date. There's going to be a delivery of the SOPs, and then we're done. If you wanted me to come in and be a fractional COO for your company, that is something entirely different. That is not something that I can work at from home on my time, working around my family and my life, or if this is my side hustle, I can do this a couple hours a night and work on your SOPs and have communications and team meetings with whoever I'm helping draft those SOPs versus being in an office, observing, being there from 9 to 5, 2 or 3 days a week in that fractional space as a COO, that is a completely different ask that should be thought of, not just how do I execute on this, but what should this cost? I would think it would be more. Writing
Yeah.
SOPs would be a little cheaper than living in a fractional COO world where the stakes are a whole lot higher.
Right. Right. Really quick on that, when the offer is built around when the negotiation comes back to you of, um hey, can you do this for me? I'm going to introduce you to, could you, if you do a good job for me, I'm going to make sure that I introduce you to these three people or whatever. How do you see that, the risk associated with that kind of a, I'm going to make this worth it to you kind of deal? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my experience has been, and again, this is my experience. Over the years, I was promised a lot of things, but very few of them actually became reality. So you really, I mean, you can hope for that and all that kind of thing, but don't put yourself in the basket based on those promises actually coming true. You got to price it and you got to do things relative to what the current situation is, and not, it's like don't count your eggs before they're hatched, type of thing. And yeah, so that's been my personal experience. Now, other people may have had wonderful things and everything that was promised to them they received and all that kind of thing. And it isn't that that individual doesn't have good intentions. So they're not necessarily trying to get you
Yeah.
just to get you. But again, times and seasons change and move, and situations that were looked at as being very easy to do in the beginning become, not real, or they forget.
Yeah.
People forget.
Yeah.
And my very first job in the real world, I was a programmer for at that time tape controlled. Now they're computer controlled pieces of equipment. And I was told that, we're going to start you at this, and because I didn't know anything about machining or anything. And so we're going to put you in the shop for X number of weeks and let you see the equipment and how it works and do da, do da, do da. Well, I started on Monday. On Friday, I was given a manual, and they said, here, read this manual. We need a program. And this is on a machine that I hadn't even seen. There was another part of the shop from where I started out. And they said, we need a program. And oh, by the way, if you have any questions, talk to this guy, because he went to school for it 6 months ago. Okay. Well, I had questions, and I went I went to him, and the sucker flat lied to me. Now, I don't know if he did it intentionally or it was just that he didn't remember, but it made me look real stupid with my first program. And they said, we're going to send you to school and we're going to do all. Well, none of that ever happened. Now, their intentions were probably great. And I already had the job. It wasn't like it wasn't, they were trying to,
Yeah.
sweep me in, but they just didn't happen. I sent myself to school and I did these other things that I knew would be important for me personally. And, but promises are great, but don't hang your life on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be my caution. Deal with
Mhm.
what you have in your hand. And if the other comes, that's great and wonderful, but don't don't bet your life on it.
Yeah, Keith, I think we were chatting a little bit about this earlier, but I'm with a client I currently have that I'm helping them write their SOPs. They're a construction company that has a few different offerings. They offer like laminate shelving, they do wire closet shelving, um they do garage doors. They do a lot of bathroom glass, be it mirrors or shower doors. So it's a variety of offerings that they provide. And one of their suppliers actually has a conference that they hold every couple of years, plus every 3 months or so, every quarter, they have a training for new companies who want to get into, especially in the laminate shelving industry across North America. So this is Canada and the US is who they supply. And one of the things they preach often at the conferences is that you need to have good standard operating procedures across your organization. It'll help you be successful. And as he has over the years gone to these conferences, he's heard that message, but then he's also as witnessed many, many people, many hands raised. Hey, how do we actually do that? What can you provide us that can get us started and get us going and moving in that direction so we can have these SOPs? He and I have known each other for a long time, and so we occasionally just have a bite to eat together and catch up on our lives. And he asked me specifically, he knew about my business, and he said, "Can you write SOPs? Do you have experience in that?" And I said, "Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, it's one of the things I do." So he talked to me about doing that and helping his sales leads of the different divisions, as well as his production and his office manager, write their SOPs so they have a very good structure around this is what we do and this is how we do it, and everyone knows what's going on. So there can be cross training, there can be cross coverage. If someone is out on vacation or someone unfortunately gets sick or has something happen with their family. And so I've stepped into that role and helped him. And then he also at the recent conference took it to the supplier and said, "Hey, would you at all be interested? I have a friend who has a consulting business. He's helping me write the SOPs. Would you be interested in partnering with us to help offer these services across all of your all of your customers that are purchasing these supplies from you, because you've talked about building SOPs, but we haven't really seen anything." And kind of everyone just has to go take care of themselves, but almost becoming like a preferred partner with that supplier company to be able to help companies around the US and Canada write SOPs and leverage, yeah, exactly, and build off of each other's success and help them be as successful as they can be. And I said, "Well, I absolutely love that idea." So he went down there and talked to them, and they're continuing in those talks. Now that's something that we really hadn't discussed when we started, when I agreed to go work for him, but the opportunities are there. Will it happen? I don't know, because a lot of it is out of my control and some of it's out of his control. But what we do have is we do have a good, and I'm working with him at a reduced rate. Dave talked about that earlier. He knows what my rate is, but knows that I'm helping him at a reduced rate because I am getting started and I want to take care of my friend. I want his business to be successful. But but I'm excited to see where this could go and what opportunities could arise from it. But I don't know if I would have necessarily gone into it with the understanding of this is going to happen. I think I would be a little more hesitant, like Dave mentioned, and just say what is the actual right now and what does that look like and what is the commitment right now? Because people do have good intentions. I have good intentions, and they don't, even though I communicate them, I do my very best to follow through, but there are situations and things that are outside of my control, you know. And I think one of the important things is just as in the dealings as I'm discovering, it's just open communication and honesty and being upfront and realizing that, that I appreciate my friend with that idea, and he kind of has that mindset that he's always looking to do something else, which is why he has a construction company that does 5 or 6 different things. He would want to do 10 things, but he hasn't gotten there yet. But he has very good intentions. And I think another thing too is trust your gut. What does your intuition tell you? Um, listen to it, because if I think, Keith, you were even sharing about a situation like that where your intuition told you one thing and you didn't listen, and you had to learn the lesson. And sometimes that's how we learn the lessons. But yeah, I love the thought of something becoming more,
Mhm.
but I also think trust your intuition, and help people, and good things will follow. And I'm a big believer in that we reap what we sow. And if we're doing what we can to help and bless others, that will come back to us.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that I will bring my story of when I let anticipation of a expanded opportunity affect the pricing of the current opportunity. And I think Dave said it exactly right, is you've got to still price the current project for itself. Um, and in the interest of time, I'm just gonna say thank you to both for bringing perspective to this conversation that I know that I could not pull out from only my own experience. Um, and I hope something that what you all have said will resonate with some of the people, someone who's listening. There is a question in the Facebook chat. Um, I'm not sure. The question is about learning and experience in there, but I'm not sure which there it's referring to. So because we're already over time, and David, I know we have to be sensitive of your time. Um, I'm just going to wrap it here for now, and maybe we can follow up in the chat. Um, Today we looked at Alex in terms of what happens when instability and business model collisions and scope creep happens, and how that becomes financially visible, because risk in business is always measured financially. That is why this is not just a pricing conversation, it's a business structure conversation with financial consequences. It looks like a pricing problem on the surface, but really it's a structure, it's a governance, it's an authority, access, and agency problem. The lesson is really simple. Just because you can price low does not mean that low price is the right business strategy for you. Pricing has to fit your business model, the responsibility that you're carrying, the the burden of delivering the offer, the value that offer creates for the client, the expectations that the client has experienced, whether it's articulated or not, and the kind of business that you're building and the leverage in the relationship that you have. When the business model is unclear, pricing becomes unstable. When expectations are unclear, compensation and responsibility will always drift apart. If access gives you opportunity, but not enough leverage to make the relationship healthy, then pricing pressure becomes dangerous. And if you want to work through what this conversation means in your situation, that is the kind of conversation we have in the private workshop. And Dave and David are part of these public conversations because they've agreed to be available there for coaching and advising. Thank you for thinking about these things with us.